I will make certain very broad statements about what has happened today. I am of the view that central budget alone should not be seen in isolation. Why? The central budget, the total expenditure GDP ratio is about 11.37%, if I remember this number correct, but it may be less by 0.1 or 0.2%, that's not an issue here. Or to put it in a round term, I will put it as 10% so that I can calculate things better. So, this is the public expenditure GDP ratio. Why we are interested in this ratio? Why not the absolute amount of money? While comparing expenditure over a period of time, there is an inflation built into it. So what I should do? I should deflate the nominal values. That is one way of doing it. In a public finance concept, I earlier said y equals, so this G upon y tells me what is the size of the economy that the government controls. So when I say the central budget public expenditure GDP ratio is 10%, it means 10% of the national income is directly spent by the central government. So on 1st of February, we have decided how this 10% will be for the next fiscal year. That has been done. About this forms only 40% of the public expenditure in India. Another 60% is spent by the state government. So what? Another about say 15%. This is central government expenditure. This is state government expenditure. This is the total size of the state. So, the combined expenditure of the center and the state will be about 25% of the national income. This 15% is decided in a decentralized fashion over 29 states and union territories. That's why we don't keep an eye on this. And expenditure is by and large restricted to that particular state. But if you want to take a national level analysis of public expenditure, it is only this combined center and state expenditure that is essential. Of this, let me assume the deficit here is 3.2%, another 3%. That means the combined deficit GDP ratio is this much. So, out of 25% of public expenditure, 6.2% will be deficit GDP ratio. That means remaining 18.8% is the owned revenue of the government. So, this is budget per se. As reflected in the budget, the role of state, if you want to quantify the role of state in the economy, then you can make a quantification like this. But there is an extended role of government. One is called the local governments. That is around 2 to 3%. Let me say 2.5%. That means how much it comes to? 27.5. By and large, the deficit in local governments are not very large, assuming that they all have a balanced budget. Then there are public sector undertakings of both the central and the state governments. Though the expenses of the central and state governments are not reflected in the budget, but they are by and large decided by the government itself. If you take the turnover of the public sector enterprises as a ratio of GDP, that means the turnover of the public sector enterprises controlled by the government itself as a ratio to GDP is about another 10%. So, turnover of public sector units as a ratio to GDP. So, nearly 4/10 of our economy is controlled by the state. Of this 4/10, only 1/4 is central government. Even looking into the larger public sector as 40% of GDP, of which central government is only 10%. For that we are making so much of noise, as if that is going to turn around the economy. It has got a direct link with growth. We often say that whether it is a growth oriented budget. So far I have not come across a single study in India relating public finance with growth. All our students, PhD students also will do lot of work. They will find a causality flowing from public expenditure to economic growth. If we take that, even today, yesterday one of my MA students is working on that, how public expenditure leads to growth, or whether economic growth leads to higher public expenditure. Where the causality is, where is the effect? Whether the causality flows from public expenditure to economic growth, or causality flows from growth to public expenditure. Local government. It is a conceptual issue. I did not elaborate on that. For instance, do you agree that universities are public institutions? No. We do not know where they are. See, my university, it has got about 150 crore budget, of which government of Tamil Nadu gives about 9 to 10 crore. Remaining 140 crore, the money paid by the people. The moment it comes into the public institution, that revenue becomes public revenue. Only thing, it is not being scrutinized by the assembly. But it is very much a public revenue because it is owned by the public institution. But your institutional system doesn't subject that revenue to public debate and public scrutiny. We have corporatized even drinking water, right? A basic utility that the government should provide. it is done by an autonomous institution. And partly government would finance, but as such the finance of, I have not gone into details, but I am only conceptually looking at it, that many of these institutions which are so called public institutions have enormous amount of private revenue but treated as public revenue. Treated as public revenue. Any business enterprise, if you see, if they get some surplus in an activity, they will reinvest it after taking away some amount of profit. But no university has ever reinvested the surplus created in examination. All the autonomous colleges have enormous amount of surplus in the examination wing. All universities have enormous amount of surplus under the examination account. Immediately they will transfer it to the main budget. All universities have enormous surplus in the correspondence education system. That is why government of Tamil Nadu gives only 10 crore out of 150 crore budget. Actually, they should give about 40 to 50 crore, because we have enormous amount of surplus in these two accounts, that is examination account as well as the correspondence account. That surplus is transferred to the main budget. So to that extent it is treated as public revenue. So the government grant is reduced accordingly. So it is only the deficit grant that the government gives. So functionally it becomes a public revenue. I will give you one more example just because he raised it. You all know about Amma Canteen. If you go through the CAG report, so far not even a single pie the government of Tamil Nadu has given to any local body to run the Amma Canteens. So it is seen as a government scheme but implemented by the local body with its own revenue. It is something like USA telling us how we should spend money on defense. Suppose tomorrow US uses our base to wage a war on Pakistan, making us to pay for it. Something like what it has made Iran to pay for a war. So there are many areas within the public sector which are very grey, some of which have enormous amount of publicness character, but finances are private, just like universities do. So that is why I want you to bring in these things into it. Recently the Uday scheme, what is the rationale behind it? The distribution companies supply electricity at subsidized rates. We have created a regulator called Regulatory Authority for Electricity. What that fellow has to do? He should say either you cross subsidize, but there is a cap on how much you can cross subsidize. If still there is a deficit, there should be an open, transparent flow of money from the budget to the electricity transmission corporation. That has not happened.